Good morning. Welcome to our August 2nd, 2016 Calaveras County Board of Supervisors special meeting. This morning we're going to go into closed session. Before we do that, I would like to ask if there's any public comments
On the closed session item.
on the closed session item.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Doug Benton from Tuolumne County. I'd like to congratulate all of you as a board. I know last week you were handed a very tough decision to make, and I can't say how proud I am of a group of folks to make a stand and stand behind your decision because it was right. And I realize that your county staff was strong-arming you, so to speak, and backing you into a corner. But I must say that your constituents should be very proud that you were held strong and stayed with the right decision. And I want to thank you for that. Have a good day.
Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll adjourn into closed session. All right, so welcome back to our Calaveras County Board of Supervisors special meeting for August 2nd, 2016. I would like to report out on our closed session agenda item. It's a conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation, one case, pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9 D2. There's no action taken. Could you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so we'll enter our public comment period. Any item of interest to the public that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board and is not posted on consent or regular agendas may be addressed during the public comment period. California law prohibits the board from taking action on any matter which is not posted on the agenda unless it is determined to be an emergency by the Board of Supervisors. If public comment is completed before the 30-minute allotted time period, the board may immediately move to the regular agenda. If public comment is not completed during the allotted time period, it will be continued at the conclusion of the consent agenda in order to provide an opportunity for the remainder of the comments to be heard. So we'll allow 3 minutes today for public comment. Is there any public comments, please?
Is it just on the agenda item?
No agenda item. Not on the agenda items.
I can't speak on anything that isn't on the agenda?
You can't speak on anything that is on the agenda. Anything that's not on the agenda is fine.
Okay. I hope you have your pencils out, our 5 supervisors. I'm addressing a situation on 6308 Mountain Ranch Road that I've been in touch with Chris Wright about. I've been in touch with the sheriff department, talked directly to the sheriff a couple of times. I've been to code compliance 4 or 5 times. I have friends that have filed written complaints, and to be blunt, it is a slap in the face to long-term, law-abiding, tax-paying citizens that what is going on at 6308 Mountain Ranch Road is allowed to continue. We have a structure that's ready to fall into Mountain Ranch Road if it goes over. It's that close to the road. It's half taken apart. They've been directed by code compliance to get rid of the building. There was 2 of them. One of them they moved up on the hill they're living in. It's where their grow is. It's been ignored as far as I can see. It is a slap in the face. Every time we drive down Mountain Ranch Road, we have to look at it. Now they have a big Dipsy dumpster, you know, the big dumpster with the 2 lids. It's full of garbage. It's overflowing. Now they're piling up the garbage next to it. That's probably 30 feet off Mountain Ranch Road. There's nothing being done. There grows in plain view. It's a slap in the face, and how long do we have to put up with it? 6308 Mountain Ranch Road. It'll take you 5 minutes to drive up there and look at it, 5 minutes to come back. We'd like something done.
Thank you. Any other public comments? None? Okay, we'll continue on to our regular agenda.
Item number 2 is from the Board of Supervisors. Supervisor Cliff Edson is requesting a motion to reconsider item 8 on the July 26, 2016 board meeting agenda, awarding a professional services agreement between the County of Calaveras and Phillips & Jordan Incorporated for hazardous tree removal services due to the Butte Fire for an amount not to exceed $9,775,053.39 and a term ending August 31st, 2017.
Okay, so since my name's attached to it, I'll explain it, or at least part of it, making things kick in. When we had our meeting last week on this agenda item that was before us, there was a lot of discussion going on. One of the discussions, when we called for votes or a motion, there was only one motion taken. And there were no more motions after that. And so I didn't feel like staff had a clear direction, or even the public had a clear direction on what was going on there. And so I went to county council and asked her about that because I felt like it was incomplete. And so that's why I asked for a motion to reconsider by the board so that we can have that agenda item, in my mind, completed. And I can let staff, or let county council elaborate more on that if she would like.
I'll just add that there were some questions as far as the process or why this was being brought forward, why a special meeting was being held. And just so the public knows, under the board process or board procedures, any special meeting may be called by the board chair or by a majority of the members at any time, as long as that special meeting is agendized in compliance with the Brown Act, which this meeting has been. So for purposes of today, the special meeting was requested requested by the chair. We did meet the Brown Act requirements of agendizing it, and under the board procedures, there is Board Rule 31 allows for reconsideration of items. That rule allows for any board member who's in the majority to bring a motion forward for reconsideration, considering there was not the motion died for lack of a second. The majority in that situation would be the 4 that did not second the motion. Chair Edson was in that majority, and so he is within the realms of the procedures to make this motion and to request this reconsideration, and that's why we brought it forward today. So for purposes of this item, it is in compliance with Rule 4 and Rule 31 of the board procedures.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So at this time, I'll ask for public comments on this particular item.
George Fry. I'm reading the item number 2, and at the end it says not to exceed the dollar amount and a term ending August 31, 2107. So we're going to allow these people until 2107 to complete the project. Thank you.
Good catch there, George.
Pardon me?
Good catch. So there's a typo there on August 31st, 2017, not 2107.
That was a typographical error in just the agenda item for the motion for reconsideration. The date is correct in the actual item for item number 3 on today's agenda. The date is correct.
So, any other public comments?
Susan O'Grady, I just had questions. When I read the newspaper article that it wasn't the lowest bid and it wasn't with a county business, it was someone outside the county that got the bid. I just had questions on who voted on it and how that happens.
For purposes of this item is just a motion for reconsideration. If the reconsideration is approved and we move on to item number 2, that would be something that certainly staff can address. But for purposes of item number 2 in front of the board today, this is just the motion for reconsideration. If the motion for reconsideration dies, we do not move on to item 3 on today's agenda.
Okay. Any other public comments?
Good morning. I'd like to say thank you again for allowing us to come and speak. Have some documentation I'd like to give to the board. In there's an email, and in the email it's just some points that we were looking for clarification on after last week's meeting. We walked out and the Public Works Director spoke to the proposals that were provided and got into depth about the quality of the proposals and the contents. And I'm just looking for clarification. I've also provided our proposal and Phillips and Jordan. In particular, direction was given to traffic control. The other topic was schedule. So I would like you to have the opportunity to have these in front of you and take those into your consideration. Both proposals are very good, fellas. It's a nice proposal. My hat's off to you. But in particular, I'd like to speak to Section 6, General Terms and Conditions, Item M, Right to Negotiate Proposals. In Section 6, it states, the County of Calaveras reserves the right to negotiate any price or any provision except any part or all parts of any and all proposals, whichever is in the best intent of the county and the tax-paying public. I'd like to hit on that, tax-paying public. That's a pretty big deal. Respondents are encouraged to submit their best price in the proposal. The county intends to negotiate only with firms whose proposals meet the requirements of the County of Calaveras. So my question is, why didn't the Public Works Department or the board exercise that right? Last week we talked in great length about not only being lowest bidder, but responsive. And because the direction was given to award to Phillips, I'm just kind of at a loss. If we are looking out for the taxpayer, why didn't the Public Works Department and the board use the power that is granted to them in their proposal?
30 seconds.
Secondly, item 3 on the agenda today. Real quick, just quick and dirty. It's
Sorry, you can't, we don't want to talk about item 3 yet.
okay. I'll come back for item 3. Okay.
We're just on item 2 right now.
All right, I got ahead of myself. So then, if we rewrote the proposal or the item and we're accepting a duration of August of 2017, I'd like to know, has the Public Works Department or has the board requested a resource-loaded CPM schedule? It's kind of an important thing in our industry. Thank you.
Okay. Any other public comments?
Ladies and gentlemen, I really like the way you start your meetings out with the Pledge of Allegiance. And we all know within the pledge, it's justice for all. And I want to make sure that our argument is being heard here. It's not about being local. It's not about knowing someone. It's asking for a reasonable, responsive review of our proposal. Each proposal, as you know, because you have a copy of them, had approximately 60 pages in them. County staff has told us they spent 3 hours reviewing those. If you do the quick math, they read over 1 page per minute, about 1.3 to be exact. Plus, within that 3 hours, they still have the time to do their tabulation and add points to them. Please consider that. County staff has also told us, to yourselves, that they did not have, I believe, competent staff to review these proposals with the background in the field and the nature of the project. I question that. Not only did they read 1.3 pages per minute with not competent staff, according to staff, but they were able to make the judgment they have. Staff also stated that all proposers, all four, were qualified and had a reasonable proposal. The lack of planning of the staff should not be an emergency upon the board. Please do not make rash decisions. I brought this up again last week, and I'd like to drive the point home again. Please ask your staff to stop strong-arming you with their specific naming of agendized items. We're right back to the same situation we were last week. If they would list a non-specific name on the list, as your proposal requests, you as a board can exercise your right to award the project to the tax-paying public. Why you allow your staff to strong-arm you is beyond me. I've contacted a couple other local counties. It does not happen in their county. In closing, the only thing that Sierra Mountain Construction is asking for here today is they're asking for county staff to provide them with a reasonable review of their proposal. It was directed last week that they were going to hire a competent third-party outside consultant who had past experience that were well within their reasonable grounds. That has not happened. Again, the Pledge of Allegiance states justice for all. I believe our justice here is asking for a reasonable review of our proposal. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Okay. Any other public comments?
Michael Falvey, live in Mountain Ranch. Since the fire abused us, attacked us, I live in pretty much the geographical center of the fire, you might say, half a mile away from the geographical center. The area's been devastated. That was hit number one. Hit number two was a tsunami that followed shortly after. I don't have to go through it with you. You know what I'm talking about. That was a tsunami of the influx of people. That was hit number two. Now, in my particular case, I can't speak for the rest of the public, but in my particular case, the bugs now are hitting my property. And they're hitting them right on the right-of-way. I'm a perfect example of what needs to be done to help us out. My driveway, let's say there's my entrance to my property, let's say there's 60 pine trees there. In the last month, 40 of them have died. They've been marked for removal by arborists. We can't afford to sit on this, We've been hit, we've been knocked down, we've been kicked, and now we're going to have insult to injury if this isn't addressed quickly. Mr. Oliveri knows all about the bug situation. And again, I'm talking about myself here, being a little stingy, but I am a perfect example of what's happening after the fire. I watched them come to the road, cross the road onto my property, and now they're wiping out my trees. I stayed during the fire, and I helped protect my house, and I kept all the big pine trees around my house from burning. And now I'm looking at the bugs come up the hill and wipe out what I, put it on the line for. So please, take care of this, will you? It's a chance to take care of things. And give us something to have a little faith in the county with, besides all these things that have happened to us since the fire, and including the fire. Thank you.
Okay. any other public comments? All right, then I'll ask the question. I'll ask the board if they're willing to reconsider the RFP that we were discussing last week.
I'm willing to reconsider.
Chair, just so the record is clear, you're actually making the motion, so then Supervisor Calaveras is seconding that motion. I just want to make sure that the record is clear.
Yeah, Supervisor Edson made the motion, I will second it.
Did you
Okay,
make
so we have we have a motion by me and then a second by Supervisor, which happens rarely, and a second by Supervisor Oliveira. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain. So we have 4 yeses and 1 up in the abstains.
Item 3 is from the Public Works Department to authorize the board chair to execute a professional services agreement between Calaveras County and Phillips and Jordan Incorporated for hazardous tree removal services due to the Butte Fire incident for an amount not to exceed $9,775,053.39 and a term ending August 31st, 2017.
Okay. Any public comments? Oh, sorry, Jeff, go ahead and present.
Thank you. Jeff Krovitz, Public Works Department. I'm not going to go over our discussion from last week. Make a few points. In the opinion of Public Works, as was stated by several citizens, the important thing is that we get these trees, hazardous trees that were killed by the fire along our county roads, removed and treated. From our perspective, the cost differential between the apparent low bid and the recommended number 1 bid is not worth the potential for A, not removing the trees in an expeditious fashion, or B, risking the entire program for hazard tree removal, which exceeds $12 million. Second, the concern that a local bidder is not getting awarded, or the recommendation for award of this bid is to a bidder that is not a local, is certainly laudatory, and I appreciate that. However, because the majority of these funds will be provided by the federal and state FEMA and Cal OES, it is precluded from giving local preference on this contract. And I think it goes to the larger discussion. If the monies are coming from what everybody in the United States pays taxes for, then we are trying to represent everybody in the United States and not just everybody in Calaveras County, the ones that took the hit on this. Third point I want to make is that this is more than just a logging contract. Of course, logging is an important component, which is felling the trees and loading them onto trucks, but it's heavily invested in transportation across our roads and 2 debris management sites. The contract also contemplates and requires the development of a debris management site for the treatment, processing, distribution of the remaining debris from this work. So that is another portion of this contract. And finally, performance of this contract under the FEMA guidelines to guarantee reimbursement to the county for this work is of the highest importance from the perspective of Department of Public Works and for the protection of our general fund and other precious county fiscal resources. So I want to talk briefly then about the criteria under which the proposals received by the department were judged. The highest ranking criteria was an understanding of the scope of work. And out of 100 potential points possible, demonstration of the best understanding of the scope of work of this specific project was 20 points, or 20% of the proposal. experience with similar work, doing work just like this for another jurisdiction, received 15% of the vote. The third criteria of judgment was the cost proposal, another 15%. The remaining 5 items, the remaining 50%, or 10% for each item, was the quality of the staff proposed to get the work done, the capability of developing innovative or advanced techniques for the deployment of the work, familiarity with state and federal procedures, demonstrated previous contracts completed, financial responsibility, the ability to demonstrate the ability to bond and guarantee the work being done, and then a demonstrated technical ability. The 3 people who reviewed this contract all had the same number 1 rank. So that was unanimous in the points. The raters were also unanimous in the second. The third and fourth proposals flipped in the ranking, but when actual points were added up, that was the ranking that was provided in the staff report. So as you can see, the criteria for the judgment is which firm, based on the RFP submitted to Public Works, would give the county the best product at the end of the day. Not the cheapest product, not the product that brings the most amount of dollars into the county, unfortunately, but the best product with the greatest guarantee of reimbursement for that work being executed. And that's how the ratings were defined. So I would recommend that the board award this contract to the number 1 ranked firm in the amount given for the contract duration as identified, and that would be to Phillips and Jordan. Any questions?
Questions by the board?
Sure. When we left last time we were on this agenda item, it was my understanding that the recommendation that you made is, at first you were going to say, form a committee that had supervisors on it, and then we realized we couldn't do that. But they were going to have a forester of some type, of someone with expertise on forest, on tree removal, logging, was going to be on that panel. And I thought that's where we were headed. That's why I abstained from reconsidering, and out of respect, I abstained instead of saying no. Because I think that's really the key factor that we're missing is that, yes, the points tallied up were, reflective of what you all in your professional capacity thought were true. However, I think by not having somebody that had tree knowledge on that panel has really been a detriment to our county and to the nation. And I feel that we have to, for the nation, for all the taxpayers, really look at what's best. And for what's locally best, too. So on the local, not hiring local, but on the ground, on the trees, what Mike was getting at. And that is, we don't want to just go out and haphazardly hire the first person that shows up to start cutting trees to make sure they're out of the way. These trees are very important to our community. And, I got an email from Bob Dean, who is a native plant specialist, among other things. And there's a lot of trees out there that, are marked to be removed that may not die, that may not actually be a hazard. And so that's another thing to consider in this whole process is maybe we need to extend the contract out a little bit so we're not out there eliminating these trees that bring so much value to our community. And so I really want stuff to happen on the ground now, but I don't want to be pressured by anybody to do the wrong thing for both the county and the nation. And that's what I feel the road we've been forced on right here to do. So I would like to go where we were at the last meeting, go back, have a different panel with an actual somebody with a tree expertise on it, and reevaluate the proposal. proposals in a new RFP. And maybe to put it out there to bid, somebody from Nebraska will have a better bid even. So I think that that's where I stand.
So if I understand, after that, you thought that we were going to move ahead with a panel, impaneling, and I believe this was Supervisor Ponte's suggestion at the last meeting, for a reevaluation of the existing RFPs.
No, not a reevaluation. We were going to put out for bid, put out RFP for proposal, and then when those came back, we would have a panel with the existing people we had, plus some expertise on forest and tree removal.
Okay, so I don't disagree with you if we find ourselves in a position to re-advertise. However, I got to make a couple of points to clarify. Number one, the determination of the trees that are dead or dying as a direct result of the Butte fire, the determination is being made by the contract arborist, whose contract was executed in June. That is the individual who is empowered to make this determination. The arborist that we have on consultant staff has spent the last 15 or 20 years, I believe, doing almost nothing but the identification of trees that are burned in wildfire in terms of determining whether they are dead, dying, or soon to die. So the contractor that is hired to do the removal doesn't make a determination in terms of which trees are removed and which trees are not. So I want to make sure that that's clear. And empowering a forester or an arborist on the panel to evaluate the contractor selected to remove the trees will certainly give us a broader perspective for the evaluation if we get there in the future. That determination has already been made or being made currently. So
really that is just more background on the fact that they're still out there, even though we've hired this arborist. They're still out in the public a great concern about how we proceed. And so that is, and in order to make sure we do the best job, I would like to have the right amount of expertise on that panel to make sure we choose the right contractor. And that was more of a background information, on the fact that that this is very critical to our community, but also not only locally, but also on a national level, because we want to make sure we spend taxpayer dollars in the wisest possible fashion, and not just because we're threatened to do it. I mean, that's what I don't like, is being threatened that if we don't choose this contract, we're going to be sued. And so I'm not going to stand here or sit here and be threatened into a contract, to approve a contract or be sued. I mean, that's not going to happen. And so I think we should. I mean, and that also is a waste of taxpayer dollars right there. We want to talk about wasting taxpayer dollars. There's no better way to waste it than in courts. So let's move on from this and reissue the RFP today and get a panel with an expert on it and move on.
So the only thing I can say is that the debris removal in the aftermath of a state or federally declared disaster is considered by both FEMA and Cal OES to be an exigent condition, a condition that needs attention as quickly as possible.
Well, then why have we waited this long to get here?
We've
been doing this in March. But no, we're talking about it now. And now I'm under the gun. I'm being threatened to make this decision. When it's not under me, I didn't delay.
I can only address that with the fact that, given the nature of the burn area, its geography, the road widths, the narrowness, and the amount of work that has been going on there since the fire, and the fact that we did not complete the building debris removal until June of this year, made it more difficult for us to put additional contractors into the field in the middle of that.
We could have issued the RFP in March.
The RFP was issued in May, so.
Right, but it could have been issued a lot earlier, right?
It could have. We could have picked up a
lined
month.
it up. We could have lined it up, but we didn't. And so now I'm hearing, well, we got to do this now. If we don't do it now, you're out of luck. And then we have the company who we've awarded the contract. We theoretically awarded the contract to, which we never voted on to award the contract, has sent to us as a board a threat of litigation, which is a public document. So, I mean, I'm not going to, maybe they are the best firm, but let's reissue it and actually have an expert on trees.
Chair, I have a question. So, Jeff, can you reiterate to me or refresh my memory the timing of we've had a 6-month extension. We would, if we don't have active movement, you might say, or a lot of work being done or boots on the ground by a certain time, are there opportunities for further extensions? Or are they guaranteed or not, or?
The way the time frame works in a federally declared disaster is the responsible government entity. Did you want to talk to this one? Let me try it, and if I blow it. The entity, or Calaveras County, would have 6 months to remove the debris. A 6-month extension can be granted by the state, which would be Cal OES. After that, any extension to this debris removal work must be granted by FEMA. And so in this particular situation, the 6-month window was ended around the middle of March. And Cal OES has indicated that we have the extension to the middle of September.
And these extensions are granted because of what you mentioned earlier about another influx of contractors up there when we were trying to remove debris, et cetera, et cetera.
That's correct.
So that's why the extension was granted?
That's correct.
Okay.
However, after the 1 year, then it's completely at the discretion of FEMA. And so FEMA's discretion to make a determination is based upon progress that we've made, reasons why we haven't made more progress, and there is no guarantee that that extension would continue. So there's the potential that when that 1 year period is up, FEMA does not grant the extension. That means that any dollars expended as part of this program are not reimbursed.
So if we were to pursue, we're still responsible for removing those trees, we as Calaveras County.
Correct.
So if FEMA says, no, we're not going to reimburse you for your costs, we're responsible for the $9 million or so to remove those trees.
The potential of the additional $2 million contract with the
Does FEMA
arborist.
have a criteria in which to grant or deny extensions, or is it just based on?
No. So basically, and an email was forwarded to you with responses from Cal OES, so hopefully you had the opportunity to read through that. In terms of the extension from FEMA, there has to be extenuating circumstances. There has to be things that were outside of our control. For instance, that was the argument for the state extension, because we had ash removal up there, you had PG&E up there, you had AT&T up there, and the reality is it just wasn't, from a public safety perspective, we didn't need any more large equipment up there. So once those projects were completing, that was the opportunity to get out there. So I completely agree with you, Supervisor Wright. I understand your frustration. These discussions should have happened earlier. The unfortunate part of this is you are backed up against a wall. And it's not, we're not strong-arming you. FEMA's not threatening us. We don't have to take their money. We don't have to do a grant with them. We don't have to. We don't have to jump through their hoops. You can hire whoever you want based on our local purchasing policy and state law. We have to pay for it. That's the issue. And we don't have $12 million. So the reality is these trees are still there. They're still a hazard. And that is what we have to deal with. So we really are up against a wall at this point. And we have tried to figure out any possible way that we could extend this past the year. and there just isn't. FEMA has had communications with us all along that what the timelines are. We've known all along what the timelines were. This isn't a surprise to anyone who's been involved in this process. So in order for us to go out to another RFP, that will push us past the September 20th date, which is the end of that 6-month extension from the state. FEMA would not look at us going out for another RFP as an extenuated circumstance. That's an internal issue to the county. So from their perspective, that would not be an argument to allow an extension. So, the reality is, if we delay this anymore, then we truly, and I'm not trying to be dramatic, we truly do risk the project. We have to do the work anyway, but it becomes a general fund obligation. It becomes a liability to the general fund because there is no one we can, this is federal regulations. There's no one that we can get, to make an exception for us because we're small, because we're rural. We're at the end of the road here. So we have to make a change. And also, unfortunately, I wasn't here at the last meeting. I was in another all-day meeting. The issue is, in terms of lowest bidder, that is always a consideration for we always want to try to go for lowest bidder. But the most important piece is scope of work. And the FEMA requirements since Hurricane Katrina is where you saw a lot of the requirements for reporting and documentation, primarily with debris removal. There were a lot of unsavory activities that happened with Hurricane Katrina. And because of what those activities were and the hundreds of millions of dollars that were paid out to vendors with no documentation, we are now on the hook. Everyone who gets a public assistance declaration is now on the hook to follow all of these requirements for documentation. So the other portion that we really have to be mindful of, and I think that Public Works actually did a really good job in looking at this as well, is ensuring that whatever vendors we're looking at have a background in dealing with FEMA and FEMA speak. Because we may choose a vendor that doesn't have that background. We'll be in the same boat because that vendor may not have had the capacity or the knowledge on how to do that reporting, how to do that documentation. All those expenses that get incurred are still not claimable. So, it's kind of a difficult situation. It's hard for people to understand, believe me. Every auditor in the state that's had to deal with public assistance, we're all kind of commiserating with each other because these are a lot of hoops to jump through. They seem like it's a lot more work, and it seems like more cost for us to have to deal with all of these issues and documentation requirements. But these are the hoops. And so we don't have to do it, but then we have to pay for it. So
a follow-up question to that then. So are we guaranteed this grant from FEMA?
For right now?
Right.
Yes, so long as we follow the documentation requirements, the procurement requirements, all of the requirements that's with any grant, with any federal grant that you get. There is a whole application and there is a whole guidance. And if you don't follow that guidance, then you don't get reimbursed. This is no different than any other federal grant that we get, except it's exponentially larger. It's the largest federal grant that I think this county has ever seen.
So we have FEMA who's saying, okay, we're going to support this, and this is the amount of money. They are aware of that at this point. And as long as our contractor, along with working with your office, I assume, and Public Works and such, follow every detail, our chances of getting 100% reimbursement look pretty good.
Yes.
And then our portion would be?
0. So what was negotiated for debris removal, for ash removal and for hazardous tree removal is that the federal grant would cover 75%, the state will cover the other 25%. Normally, what would happen is the state and the county would split the 25%, where the county would have to pay 6 1/4. In this particular case, we would not have to pay any match at all for debris removal. And then I also want to reiterate, because of some of the comments that have been made, but also some of the comments that have been made in the press, what we're talking about are fire-damaged trees. We are not talking about bug kill. So it's only fire damage. Bug kill, we'll be having those discussions here next week, exactly, 3 days from now. But we're talking about fire hazardous trees.
Trees were weakened by the fire, not the town.
I would agree. Unfortunately, that's not how the grant works. So it's another one of those unfortunate circumstances.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca, any more questions for Public Works?
Yeah, so in this FEMA process, the arborist was a requirement by them.
Yes.
And I know that. Could you explain that process for us?
It's very similar. It was a professional services solicitation that Public Works went out with. That's what we were doing in the March, April, May timeframe. We had to get the arborist on board first to be able to determine the specifics of the trees that were mortally wounded as a result of the fire. We went out to that contract, only had one respondent, requested Calaveras and FEMA to allow us to award to the one respondent that we had determined was both responsive and responsible, and they did. And so this board awarded a contract for approximately $1.2 million to Tetra Tech. They came on board at the end of June and have been working, I would say, very hard over the last month. They have identified and marked all of the right-of-way trees, and they have, by Friday, they anticipate having caught up to the number of trees on private properties for which we have received right of entries. We received nearly half of the right of entry signed on parcels that have, from a drive-by, the potential of a fire-killed tree or a fire-dying tree on that parcel. That process will continue. The arborist contract also has in it requirements for oversight and observation of the work of the contractor, and oversight of the paperwork and documentation provided by the contractor who is removing those trees. So for this process and for this program, we had the event, the disaster, we have an arborist, then we have a contractor. Does that answer your question?
How important it is to get these trees, being that it's getting close to the 1-year anniversary anyhow, these burnt trees out, and what effect does it have on the if you know, the still living trees?
The need to get these trees out is really twofold. Of primary concern, of course, is, and as Ms. Callan spoke to, the auditor spoke to, the need to comply with the schedule as defined by the grant program. Having trees being moved out within a 1-year period, or having an extension to allow for additional time to get those trees out. So that's the funding portion of it. In terms of the public, the threat to public, the longer a dead tree remains standing, the more compromised it is. The easier it is, the less force it takes to push it over. Some of them have collapsed on their own that we've taken out since the fire. So the longer one waits, the higher the probability that these dead trees will fall. And as rains come, subsequent rains come, and you no longer have an active root system, it's much easier for them to fall in a smaller wind, as it were. So we are on a time clock because the stability of these trees is decreasing daily. And their threat to the public right-of-way is increasing every day that they remain standing.
So it's my understanding they also tracked the beetle, and then beetle comes to them, decides they don't like that tree, here are burnt trees, so they head off to the nearest living tree. Is that something that is true?
I can't answer that one.
I can actually jump into that. That is absolutely true. What happens is when the trees are burned, they give off terpenes. The beetles are attracted to the terpenes. Unfortunately, when the beetle arrives to the attractant, they find the trees that are dead, and they will not attack the dead trees. They will move on to the live trees in the area. So unfortunately...
Brian, can I interrupt?
Yes, please.
But let's not go there, because you're not an expert on this.
True.
Any more than I'm an expert on this. And so, let's just,
Okay.
let's not get into the details there, because I have some other information that, I've heard that, that's why we need an expert here to help us with that.
Very good, very good.
Thank you. So irregardless, the quicker we get these trees out of the right of way, safer our public will be.
That's correct.
I'd like to ask a question and step back to the auditor, something the auditor said just a second ago. The 25% you said was fully funded.
Yes.
If I heard that correctly?
Yes.
But in this, it actually says the county participation is $610,941.
No.
$1.
No.
That's not correct?
No.
Okay.
The county will not have a match. The county will not have a match for debris removal. The county will not have a match.
Okay, that's not the information that was given to us.
So tree removal or
Debris removal is
cutting
tree
down the
removal.
tree? Okay.
All of that is 100% state and federal.
Yeah.
That is not normal. That is something that the state has done
Okay.
for Calaveras. So there will be no match for the county.
Okay, because our agenda does not say that.
Okay, well, that is the
Incorrect?
case. That's incorrect.
do we have something to verify that?
I could reach back out to the state. I just have it in writing from the state. Yeah, me. In a meeting, because we have always long from the very beginning, since September, we've always understood the county would have a match. We were in a meeting where it was one of the 50 meetings that we've been in with Cal OES and FEMA, and it was discussed that there would be no match. So I did reach out to our contacts at Cal OES because it's the state that's actually picking up that 6.25% on behalf of the county to validate that, because that was the first I had heard of that, and in fact it was reiterated.
So
yes,
they verified it. Okay.
they verified it to me.
So this agenda item, before any consideration is done with it, would have to be corrected that Cal OES is actually providing something like 2.4 million.
It would be 25% of the contract. And I think what's also important for the public and the board to understand is prior to Public Works getting to the point of even doing an RFP, there were months and months and countless hours between myself and Public Works staff and Cal OES and FEMA to put together the scope of work. So FEMA actually, because they look at past incidents in terms of what the requirements are for federal procurement, what the requirements are for documentation, whether that to be debris removal or whatever the project is, and they help the county determine what the scope of work is so that we are in the best arena to get reimbursed. So there is, I don't know how many times the scope of work went back and forth, but there was constant communication and modifications by the state and FEMA to make the scope of work for the project itself be what it needed to be. And then from there, that is how the RFP and potential contracts come to be. But it's not the county deciding what the scope of work is going to be. It's a very arduous process that occurs with the assistance of FEMA and Cal OES, basically directing the county what the scope needed to be to ensure that we are meeting all the requirements for that particular project.
Auditor Callan, thank you very much for your information. If I understand this correctly, the county's share was $610,941.
If we had to pay that, yes. But the state, based on what the state has reported to me, is that they are paying for that portion.
And I have no reason to doubt you.
So unless 5 people have given me, from the state, have given me inaccurate information, that's what they budgeted as part of this
Is there any way we
response.
can confirm that information?
I can go back and get an email that I received.
Even during a break or something, just to make me feel a little bit better? I'm wondering if they're commingling funds from the tree mortality program or something,
No.
and there's misunderstanding. Because
No,
that would
they,
make me feel a lot better.
We're speaking to entirely different people for tree mortality than we are for this. This is specific to Calaveras County, specific to this incident number, specific to the funding for these particular projects.
I would love to see that documentation. If you would do that, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
So I have one more question. So you're satisfied with the RFP process?
I am satisfied with the RFP process, yes.
Any other questions from the board?
I have a comment or two. Mr. Krovitz, could I address you, please? I know we discussed this briefly on last board meeting. If a contractor fails to perform, he will sacrifice his performance bond. Is that correct?
Yes, according to how much is left of the contract.
But nevertheless, the county still has a responsibility to remove that hazard, correct?
Correct.
And right now, we're looking at approximately $12 million for this project, which is, from what I understand recently, totally refundable to the county of Calaveras. Is that correct?
That's my understanding from what Ms. Callan said.
So I don't have $12 million to go throw on red at the roulette table. I don't think the county has that kind of money to gamble. I would want to get a contractor that has a track record, that has the performance history to do this project, seeing this is one of the biggest grants, if you will, or projects for Calaveras County. I'd like to go with experience and a qualified contractor that bid on the RTP or RPTs.
RFP.
The ones for proposal. And would you agree with me on that?
I would.
Have you ever seen a contractor fail in a situation like this?
I have had contractors fail in projects that I had responsibility for.
I've been in that situation also. Not personally, but with a prior profession. Board, I would recommend that we go with the experience and the bid process determined by our public works.
Okay. Any other board comments? Public comments, please.
I don't mean to keep coming up, I don't
You can.
necessarily want the spotlight or anything, but coming from the public, again, in the middle of a deep fire. Concerning Supervisors Wright, speaking about talking to Bob Dean, I had the arborist come out to my property, and I kind of was, I handled the situation myself. I made calls, and I wanted to be there when they were marking my trees. I gave them the right to entry, and they came on. I met the arborist, and he told me, just for your information, you know, if you're concerned about the arborists and what they're looking at, what they're doing, he told me, he goes, now, I'm kind of huggy with trees. That's exactly what he said. I'm kind of huggy. And I said, well, that's good. I said, I've been accused of being a tree hugger many times myself in the last 40 years. But so that actually kind of, soothed my feelings. And he went around and he marked my trees, and I agreed with him 100% on what he marked that had to be removed. I actually saw one live ponderosa. I mean, it looked as healthy as any tree on my property. He had it marked for removal. I said, what's the deal? Well, he took me over to the tree and showed me what the deal was, and he says, this tree has maybe 2 years. So, you know, he convinced me right there that he was huggy, you might say. And every other tree he marked was indeed, it needed to be taken out. Now, with that being said, I agree with Supervisor Wright. I don't know how I would feel about hiring a contractor who, if I don't know what kind of agreement you guys have with this Phillips and Jordan, but if someone came to me and said, if you don't hire me, I'm going to sue you, I'd say, well, have at it, pal, because that's not the way to do business with me. So I don't know what that's worth. That's public comment. And from the street, again, based on the cleanup in the last 8 months, whatever it's been, 9 months, that contractor doesn't have the best reputation as far as how they attack some of our problems. Just saying. And that's not just me speaking. You know, as neighbors, we talk, and there were some questions about their capabilities and who they brought in to do certain aspects of the cleanup, specifically falling of trees. There was some real questions about. I had a logger tell me, this is a quote, he goes, I'm surprised someone didn't die on their project.
20 seconds.
So look at the whole picture. The arborists have done a good job in my particular case. I don't like the idea of a threat. If you don't hire me, I'm going to sue you. And I'm sure they're a reputable company and they did a good job, but some of the professionals they brought in, there were questions about it. So, thank you.
Susan O'Grady. I'm in Chris Wright's district. Thank you for standing up. My experience is there's been a lot of pariah. I'm off of Doster Road, and when the subcontractors came from out of state, Alabama, North Carolina, and they were falling trees for PG&E, when their project got a little lean that they were working on and decimating a neighbor's property, they came down the road and just cut one of my very live oaks that leaned into my property that was not damaged. Couldn't fall on the power line. Absolutely. Physics, no, it couldn't fall on the power line. It would have fallen into my property. But they hacked down this 150-year-old tree, climbed over my fence, and started to hack it up on my property. And so I've seen this onslaught. And then the day after you guys voted to let Tetra Tech take this project, they were out there graffitiing all the trees around my property because I have a corner property and I own both sides of the one road. And I'd had the USDA out there because of reforestation. So I had specialists and arborists, 3 of them, a landscaper and botanist, the arborist from the Oak Foundation that's based out of the Bay Area. And all of them told me what would live, what wouldn't. When the Tetra Tech's arborist is going down the road, they're marking trees that are going to make it. Some oaks that should never have been marked. And that the arborist already told me were going to live. That they might take 2 or 3 years to come back fully, but they would. And after listening to a town hall meeting in Mountain Ranch, I listened to the Old Gulch people say how the trees in the Old Gulch sprang back, just like the Oak Foundation was telling me mine would. So I'm looking at trees fighting for their lives, these oak trees, with the green all over them. One has got to be at least a 300-year-old live oak tree along the road, and it's springing life everywhere. They said it would do that, it would make it, it would live, it'd be a stronger tree.
30 seconds.
I have heritage oaks that are 400 and 500 years old that bought it. They've been through multiple fires over the hundreds of years, and it wasn't until they were hollowed out and became chimneys in this last fire. So I beg you to consider that maybe there's bias on the arborist side for this company.
Okay. Any other public comments?
Thanks for the meeting. My name's Ray Luke, and to represent something that one gentleman said, well, I don't have a diploma or a bachelor's in forestry. I've been a certified land manager for over 45 years, been a certified land burner. And for someone to try to look into a crystal ball, to y'all hire a company as an arborist to go out and make decisions for you in the best interest of the county and the citizens. You can't look into that crystal ball and say, guarantee that tree's going to live or he's going to die. And the answer to this gentleman's question is the fact that when you're trying to make a decision, you're talking about the taxpayer, you're trying to represent also not the taxpayer right now, but you're trying to represent the future of him. After this FEMA contract is over, and this gentleman back there's got 60 trees that's going to die, and you come back and second guess the arborist company, and they leave 30 on his property, when it comes back and that tree dies, either the county's going to pay for it directly out of their pocket, or this homeowner's going to pay for it out of his pocket. I was with a homeowners association 2 days ago. They're paying $80,000, and this is in Tuolumne County. They're paying $80,000 out of their pocket to take down trees. This FEMA project you have is in the best interest of the county and this taxpayer that's sitting back here paying and trying to protect these trees, and this lady, because once this is gone and 2 years down the road you have this hazard, FEMA's not going to guarantee what was left. The county's going to be left with paying for it out of their pocket, and or this homeowner's going to pay for it out of his pocket, because there won't be a second recourse. And so with that said, but going back to your concerns, it's hard to decide what, and I love a tree, and like I say, in land management, you do that. But for the second guess and guarantee that tree's going to live or die, someone would be chopping her head off to make that decision. And what you do, you make a good faith estimate from experience, and this gentleman right here is right. That beetle don't invade that dead tree. He goes into that live tree. No questions about it, because he's going to look for something to go eat when he gets hungry. He's going to go find something to eat, and it's a live tree. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
All right, any other public comment?
Mr. Oliveira, to speak to your point of qualified contractors, I believe that staff has already spoke to that point and said that every contractor who turned in a proposal was a qualified contractor at his discretion.
Excuse me, sir, I can't even discuss that issue.
Right. So
no problem. Just get my 5 seconds back if I could. So in 1868, the Public Contract Code was initiated for situations, to prevent situations of this nature, and that is subjectiveness. We all can have our opinion of someone or something or a color or our liking. However, until all can be above board and play by the same playing field is what the Public Contract Code is there to support. And again, to the flag, justice for all. It allows all of us equal opportunity. Again, that's what Sierra Mountain is here today asking for, is an equal opportunity for all. There's been a couple statements that's a bit preposterous to me. Money comes from elsewhere. It's only $1 million. I guess I have a small business. We only turn about $35 million a year in revenue, but $1 million is a lot of money to our small company. Your agenda, you found several errors in it. I believe this is being rushed. Please check facts versus assumptions. Look for a letter from FEMA that says, this is the date. This is the drop dead date. Not a visual, not a verbal conversation of what someone thinks they heard. Get a letter that's stated, and I'm sure that FEMA will provide that. The next thing is if we're really up against that deadline, allow Tetra Tech, the contractor you already have in place, to do the next step. Get the right of entry agreements, get the timber exemptions through CAL FIRE, and that I'm sure would satisfy FEMA for their next step to see that the process is moving. We can all make excuses in either direction. If we want this to work and we want it to be in the benefit of the taxpayer, it can happen. This is the largest grant in the county's history, according to staff. It's mesmerizing to me that staff only spent 3 hours, again, a minute or 1.3 pages per minute were digested upon this whole process.
30
For the
seconds.
largest grant within the county. Does not make sense to me. Again, we are not fighting because we're a local contractor. I'm fighting for a reasonable opportunity of our proposal to be reviewed in a reasonable manner. Thank you very much and have a good day. Again, I commend all of you for sticking them together and making the right decision here.
Any other public comments? One time, sir.
I'm glad that you have to make this decision and not me, but I am really puzzled by the fact that there are 4 companies and every one of them are, according to the people that were screening the applications, said that they were all qualified and that the proposals were anywhere from 30 to 60 pages and that only 3 hours were spent on them. That is amazing to me, that not more time was dedicated to review those. I mean, just think about reading a book. You know, it takes a lot longer to understand when you're reading a book. And we're talking about almost $10 million. And we're talking about taxpayers, not only in this county, but throughout our nation. And I think there isn't enough due diligence with this contract that you're looking at. And I think there needs to be either a forester or an arborist. I know they said they tried to find somebody. I know of 2 foresters in this county. I can't remember one of the fellows, but Mike Skinfield in Murphy's is a forester. I don't know whether he's still doing it or not, but he's done it for about 45 years in this county, and he's really good at it. So I think it needs to be revisited, and more due diligence needs to be done in terms of this contract, and more documentation. Thank you.
Marty Crane, Valley Springs. I keep hearing people question the process and pulling it down to 1.3 pages per minute and questioning all of that. When I would think if you've got if they're all like 60 pages long, and if you've got a 60-page document, and many of those pages, I don't know, but I would ask. I would suspect that many of them are formatted. So they've got the same information in the same place, and you can very quickly scan for comparative data. So maybe at least half of those pages are scanning for data. I don't know, but I find it concerning that we would try to throw this out and take us back to the beginning of this process without at least questioning that. Because if we're going to question their process and their motives and their qualifications, I mean, they told us who was on this committee. And these are people that were fully vetted. They have their finger on the pulse of our money. You want to talk about taxpayer money? I don't have $12 million either. And I know that this county, I've watched just for many years, not take advantage of programs that we absolutely needed for our survival, and then we ended up paying for it later. So that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, any other public comments? All right, bring it back to board. Any more public, any more board comments?
I just-
Another one?
Matt Roll, Sierra Mountain. To kind of echo the fact that this was a rushed process in this ranking of our proposals, we did come in fourth, which I'm not proud of. But how can a contractor who proposes a $20 million cost and a point-weighted system where cost is 15 points get a higher rating for cost in their proposal when I came in at $7.6 million? The delta of $12 million doesn't make any sense in a point-based system. So I have a hard time listening that the proposals were accurately digested and the content that is in there was actually delved into. And I would just like to stand on that and state that how can a point-weighted system where a contract proposed value of $20 million receive a higher score than a contractor who's proposing $7.6 million? Perhaps that cavalier attitude was taken through the rest of the scoring or the evaluation process, because that logically doesn't make sense. So, thanks.
Okay, any other public comments? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for discussion.
I need clarification, maybe Megan from County Council. At this point, and perhaps as of early as next week, are all the bids made public and the evaluation criteria made public?
Yes, the evaluation criteria and the evaluation criteria and the scoring sheets and everything are public documents.
So anybody can request it under the Public Information Act?
Correct.
Okay. At what point is that public?
It's public at this point.
Was it
once the contract is negotiated and the contract, once the review panel determines who they're going to be recommending the bid be awarded to, and they negotiate the contract with the contractor they're recommending the contract to go to, it becomes public record.
Okay. And so the item before us that we are looking at is a recommendation from Public Works to bring this contract forward, and we as a board are the committing authority.
The recommendation before the board is yes, staff has vetted, has completed the RFP, has gone through the RFP process, and is recommending the board execute the contract before you based on the review panel's recommendation. The contract to date is not executed. The review panel, the Public Works Department, does not have authority to execute a contract. The execution of a contract is in the authority of the board, and that is what the Department of Public Works is asking for, is that you follow the recommendation of the review panel and execute the contract with the vendor that they feel is the most appropriate.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Council, I have another question. Just to follow up on Supervisor Ponte's comments, those contractors need to be qualified contractors, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Pawnee asked, I believe, but I either didn't get the answer or didn't hear it or otherwise. The contract proposals of all of the 4 companies are public information?
That is my understanding. I know that the review and the criteria and the specific score sheets and everything, and that those have already been made available. But yes, it is my understanding that it all becomes public once the contract is negotiated.
Not approved.
Correct.
Okay, so if we were to reject all proposals and start over from square one, are those going to be, the ones that have been pitched so far, going to be public record?
I believe so.
Okay. Okay, and also, Supervisor Oliver asked for some sort of verification that the $610,000 does not come from the county. That's on our agenda, so that would need to be corrected.
No, the agenda, there's nothing that's wrong or incorrect in the contract that's before the board that staff is recommending that you adopt. The incorrection is in the staff report under the financing section. The staff report is just part of the record. The staff report is information that staff is presenting to the board in order for you to make an informed decision. Because based on information that Rebecca Callan has provided, that this information, there's more information since this was issued that, yes, the state would be taking on the full 25% and not requiring the county to come up with the 6% match. That is not something that we would have to come back for to correct a staff report on. That's been corrected in the, that has been corrected on the record by Rebecca Callan already.
Okay. So we'll trust her to do that.
Certainly if the board wants written verification, if the board is not inclined to take action on this until you get verification, we can take a break, get information, present that to you. But as far as whether you can certainly take action on the recommendation before you and ask that verification be provided to you in a memo subsequent to today's meeting.
It doesn't really have anything to do with
It doesn't have anything to do with the contract, and the reality is the budget is already set. So there's no requirement for us to come back to the board to, say, oh, you don't need to pay the $610,000 because the state's going to pay for it.
It doesn't affect the contract.
Nope.
No.
That's I agree with that.
I don't need anything. I trust you.
Okay. I don't.
Well, I trust her. It's the state I would trust.
So to clarify, all the bids, all of the bidders were qualified. Public Works is recommending this particular bid as the most qualified. Is that correct?
I mean,
all,
Jeff, you can
all four
clarify.
bids received were qualified. We're not discussing
That's
this
right.
bid that Public Works and the panel is proposing is the most qualified.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay, I had one more question while you're standing there, Jeff. So I don't have to go back through this whole contract and find it. Part of this agreement is for whoever is awarded the contract has to do the right of access agreements with the landowners, et cetera, to get the trees?
No, the right of entry agreements are essentially between the private property owners in Calaveras County. And the majority of the work on obtaining the right of entries and tracking the right of entries is being done through Tetra Tech, our arborist contract, which has already been awarded. So the right of entry, once they've been signed and executed, allows the contractor to go onto private land and remove trees.
The contractor who gets this award?
That's correct.
Okay.
That answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you very much.
Good.
Okay. Any other board comments before I call for a motion?
Well, once again, I reiterate that this is a very important decision, and we should make sure we make the right one. And I also would like to not award a contract to a company that threatens a lawsuit against the county, and the remedy being that we award the contract to that lawsuit. So there's no way that we should be awarding that contract.
Okay. So last meeting, I was concerned about local folks, and my concern is just what Mike's talking about their properties, the dangers that are happening on the roadway, the dangers that we get a little rain and a little breeze, and it's going to be a whole different world out there if we don't start removing these trees immediately. Not to mention the damage that's going to be caused from any further bug kill activity. possibility of that. And I would like very much to be able to save as many of our trees as possible. And I know that from history, like in Canada, for instance, they had the same problem many years ago. The only way that they were able to save the forest, portion of the forest in Alberta, was to be very, very aggressive and quick in getting this done and taking care of their situation. And you can see in Sierras right now how quickly the beetle is moving. So we have a lot of attracted to that. We have a lot of safety issues around standing trees that have almost been there for a year already dead. And I feel like we need to move on this thing pretty darn quickly. And even a couple of weeks could be the difference between somebody driving by in a safe environment and somebody driving by and a tree falling on them. So.
But just to be clear, though, this is for the burn trees.
Yes.
Not the beetle kills. So,
correct.
So that the public understands that.
As much as we'd like to be awarding the $9 million grant for the dead trees, maybe we're not doing that. Maybe we'll get lucky.
So, comment?
Sure.
So, last week when we met, I was, as I stated, I wanted this to go back for a review process, which for me meant to put out the RFP again and have somebody on the panel that had the experience as a forester, you might say, to help evaluate the contracts. I'm thinking long and hard about this particular situation and recognizing that, time is of the essence. We have been dealing with this now for a good 6 months, and we have had the arborists out there evaluating. Now it's time to take care of the trees that have been identified to remove the potential hazard that we have out in our community. We're coming upon a year of the fire, and the first months of the fire was certainly getting rid of the hazardous waste and ash and that sort of thing. And I can understand why, we didn't want another set of contractors up in that area when that was first and foremost. Disappointed that we didn't have that person on the panel, but I do have to say I have much respect for the Public Works Director and staff who did evaluate this, and folks from the admin office, and hearing the auditor speak about what he or she has learned and reinforces the county's commitment, or that we're not up for the money, that the state is willing to pay that 25%. It's not often that we have kind of a guaranteed grant to take care of this particular problem. Granted, everybody has to dot their I's and cross their T's and do it the right way, and that's just about with everything that we do. I don't like the threat of litigation, although honestly, it seems like everything we do is under the constant threat of litigation. And at some point, we just have to move forward and kind of put those things aside. As I look at a qualified bidder, I think they were all qualified. The amounts certainly vary. I'm hopeful that each and every contract that gets awarded, and the contractor is looking at hiring the most available local resources possible and utilizing local business. I think that's utmost important. I have changed my mind. I am going to support this professional services agreement because of things I mentioned, but most importantly, my concern is that these trees have been identified and need to come down, and we need to put boots on the ground and get the job done. And the longer we wait, the worse it gets. And I don't want to be faced with those decisions in the months to come.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion. So I make a motion to approve a professional services agreement between Calaveras County and Phillips and Jordan, Inc. for hazardous tree removal services due to the Butte Fire incident for the amount not to exceed $9,775,053.39 and a term ending August 31st, 2017.
All right.
I would second that motion, Mr.
I have a
Chair.
motion by Supervisor Ponte, a second by Supervisor Calaveras. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. So it's 4-1. Okay, thank you very much for coming in today, and we are adjourned.